Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf, Yevamos Pebes. We are 7 lines from the top of the Yamid, but perhaps before we begin, let's do a quick refresher. Yesterday, we left off with a machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish tells us that if you want something to be batal, something usr gets mixed in with something mutter, you want it to be batal, to become nullified, to become cancelled, it can't be too prominent. For instance, if something which is at times, even at times, counted, something which is sold by count, davar shebe minyan, that gives it uniqueness. It makes it special. It doesn't sort of relate to the rest of the mixture. It doesn't become part of the equation, and is not batal. Rabbi Yehuda says, in concept I agree, but it only applies to very, very specific cases. Cases where we call them es shedarkei limanos. They are exclusively sold by count, never by weight, never by bundle. That item has true prominence, true chashivas, and cannot be batal. So according to Rish Lakish, we apply it in a broader sense, so to speak. Anything which has even a component of davar shebeminyan, even if at times it is sold by count, that won't be batal. According to Rabbi Yehuda, only if it's absolutely sold in that way, but if it's sometimes not given its own individuality, it's not considered a davar shebe minyan and can be batal. Now, we had a brisa with 2 parts, a reisha where we had a chaticha of chatas, piece of basar chatas gets mixed into other pieces. Now, this piece is tamei. Those pieces of chatas are tahar. If it's 100 against 1, batal, and the kohen can have them all. In the seifa, we have a slightly different case. A piece of a chatas meat falls into 100 non-carbon chulin, regular chulin. So the piece of chatas is tar. You have 100 pieces of chulin which are tar as well. Says the brisa, loy batal. It's not batal. Question is why. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Mishnah actually is speaking about pieces, chatichos, literally pieces, slabs of meat. And therefore we can very well understand the difference between the first case and the second case. In the first case, you have a piece of chatas meat which is tummy, falls into 100 chatos which are tar, it's batal. But in the next case, in the seifa, we have a piece of chatas meat which is tar, falls into another 100 pieces of meat which are not carbon, they are chulin. Says the brisa, it's not batal. You know why? And Rashi explained, it's midrabanan, it's a chumrah. Because, what's the big deal? Just give it all to a kohen. You see, in the reisha, chatas tamei, even a kohen cannot eat. So in that case, you have to say bittul, otherwise you lost the entire bunch. That's hefsid meruba, it's significant monetary loss. Whereas in the seifa, it's a chatas tahira, mixed into 100 pieces of chulin. Give it to the kohen, sell it to him for a discount. And Rashi points out that actually we have 3 reasons. There are 3 components here, which when combined, Chachamim say don't do bittul. Number 1, it's Issa Deraisa, right? Carbon chatas for a non-kohen is asr. Number 2, it's something of significance. It's a davar sheba minyan. A piece of meat is at least sometimes counted, sometimes has that individuality. And thirdly, it's only hefsed mu'at. It's only some minor loss that he will incur, as we explained. Therefore, when those 3 conditions are present, Chachamim say, don't do bittul, just sell it all to the kohen for a discount. So that would be one approach to the brisa. Explains it very well. And this actually is Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. You see, because Rabbi Yehuda held that in theory, even a piece of meat could be batal, as we explained, because it's not something which is es shedarkei limanos. It isn't always individualized. It isn't always sold by count. There's nothing holding back that bittul, except that in the second case, because of those three components that we mentioned, it's only hefsid mud, it's the raisa, it has some chashivas, it's a piece of meat, it's sometimes sold separately, and therefore don't say bittul. Now, we had a kasha yesterday, and this is a kasha that actually Rabbi Yehuda asked on Rish Lakish, how can the piece of meat be bittul? According to you, anything which is even at times davar shebemin, even at times sold by count, such as a piece of meat, cannot be bittul, period. Why is there bittul at all in this brisa? And the Gemara answered, you know what we're speaking about? It's no longer a piece of meat. It's nimaycha, it's been dissolved, it's been liquefied, it's been made into a soup. Well, then it doesn't have chashivas, so it's lacking that third element. Right? We said there are three reasons not to make the bittul. Sorry, let's just go back on that. So it's not davar shebeminyan, because it's just a liquid soup. Even according to Rish Lakish, there's nothing that will hold back the bittul. That was the answer we had yesterday. That explains why in the Reisha, let's just focus on the Reisha now, so we'll get to the Seifa, that's going to be the Kash in the Gemara. So in the Reisha, in the first case, you have a piece of chatas, meat, which is tameh, got mixed into other pieces of chatas which are tar. But it was nimaycha, it was then blended and liquefied, ground up and liquefied. Then even Rish Lakish allows bittul, and that's why we have bittul in the brisa. The question is, what about the second part of the brisa? Why is there no bittul allowed in that case? If it's liquefied, if it's nimaycha, then there's nothing holding back the bittul. You see, Rashi set forth three conditions, three components that when combined hold back bittul. Right? The Rabbanon don't allow bittul if it's only a hefsid mud. If it's a deraisa and it has chashivas, but if it's liquefied, if it's soup, it has no chashivas, so it's lacking that third component. Why is there no bittul in the second case of the brisa? That's going to be the kasha, which begins our sugya now. 7 lines from the top. Ula Rish Lakish. Now, according to Rish Lakish, that it was nimaycha, it was liquefied. They were ground up. It no longer has chashivas. Ma'ishna Reisha, ma'ishna Seifa. Why is it that in the first case we say bittul, not in the second case? What's holding back bittul? It's just a soup. Hamar of Shisha, Breder of Idi. I'll tell you. The difference is that Reisha betumas mashkin d'Rabbanan. In the Reisha we had a chaticha of chatos tamei. It was nis'ariv with 100 chatichas chatois tehoris. How is that chaticha tamei? What tumah does it carry? Tumah d'Rabbanan. Tumas mashkin d'Rabbanan, Rashi explains, typically liquid, even when tummy cannot affect the kli. Chacham say it does because next time it might be the mashka coming from a zav, which is an avatuma. So this concept that a kli can become tummy through mashka is only d'Rabbanan, and that's the tumah that happened to arrive on this chaticha of chata. So dealing with only a tumah d'Rabbanan that you try to be mevatel, we allow it. As opposed to seifa, the second part of the brisa. Chaticha chatos tahira. Shenis arva with 100 chatichas chulin tahiras. Seifa da'iraisa. Here we're dealing with a issa da'iraisa concern because who wants to eat this mix? A non-kayan. Eating a chatas, that's a possible issa da'iraisa. And therefore we don't allow bittul. Rashi explains, listen to this, Rashi says, really what's wrong with mixing up the two things and making a bittul? Let it be Issa Daraisa. Who cares? So Rashi says because this Tana will hold. This case is unique. You see, both pieces, I should say the single and the 100, all of them, all 101 pieces are the same type of material. They're all meat. It's min that got mixed in with mina. It's min b'mina. And as we learned yesterday, there is reason to say that when they're both the same type of material, they don't challenge each other. They don't negate each other. They don't confront each other. There's no bittul taking place. That was actually Shittas Rabbi Yehuda. Now, Rashi explains that this Tana here, the regular Tana, not Rabbi Yehuda, Tana Kama will hold that, although technically, even min b'mino is batal, min ha'torah, but min rabbanon, we don't allow it. And specifically, if it's speaking about it, Issa D'Oraisa, we don't allow it. That's going to be the pshat in this price. So in the Reisha was speaking about a Rabbanon concern, a tumah the Rabbanon that wants to be batal, that's okay. But in the Sefer, where it's Issa Deraisa, since it's min b'mina, we don't allow it. Asks the Gemara, Aval tumah sheretz. Let's go back to the Reish. It's batal because it's tumah the Rabbanon. Suppose it was tumah deraisa, it touched the sheretz. What would happen? Lo yisala, it wouldn't be batal, right? So why does the Bryce have to switch cases? Just make that distinction within the Reisha. Well, it depends what type of tumah. The Rabbanon is batal, the Rice is not batal. Stop right there. Why do you have to go on to another case of the Sefer? Says the Gemara, Aval tumah sheretz, lo yisala, it wouldn't be batal if it's a tumah sheretz. Ad tonah Sefer. So why does the Sefer have to continue and switch on to a next case and go on to Aval chaticha shachatas tahira? Shinas arva b'meya chaticha shachulin tahiras. If it's a piece of chatas tor, mixing it with 100 that are chulin that are tor, there with the lo yisala, we don't allow it to be batal. Because we're trying to be mevatel issa deraisa, trying to allow kachim to a non-kohen. Why do we have to shift over to that case? We can just draw that distinction, that make that differentiation in the Reisha itself. Tameh fell into Torah. Well, it depends how tameh, depends how severe. When is it bat? B'tumas mashkin. It's only a mashkin the Rabban. Ava b'tumas sheretz. But if it touched the sheretz, tumah deraisa lo, it wouldn't be batal. Why make that shift? Why discuss the second case at all? Answers the Gemara, Tahira b'Tahira is odiflei. The Brisa finds it important to actually go and shift into the next case where you have a chatas Tahira mixing into 100 chulin Tahiras. Where perhaps you would think, it's not as bad. There's Rashi's Pshat, there's Teisa's Pshat. Rashi says, look, Tahir and becoming batal into tameh takes much more effort. But Tahir into Tahir, you're not trying to be mevatel any tumah, perhaps it should go easier. No, says the Brisa, even in this case it doesn't work. As we explained, because we're dealing with being mevatel. Kachim, which is Issa Deraisa. Taisus has his pshat, he says, the whole idea of the Kachim Tahira, the whole restriction is only to the 9 kohen. Not as bad as chatas, which is tameh, which cannot be eaten to a zor and b to a kohen. Here it's only chatas tor. Perhaps the bittul happens quicker and easier. No, even in this case, as the Brisa, you have chatas tor mixing up with chulin tahiros. It doesn't become batal, as we explained, because by dairaisa combined with the fact that it's min b'minoi, it's not batal. And of course, this is an issa d'Rabbanan. It doesn't appear like bittul happened. So whatever the reason is, we don't allow bittul in this case. So we have Rav Shisha, Breda, Rav Edith Pshat in the Brisa. Again, we're speaking b'ni moicha, everything got liquefied and superfied. This is Shitas Rish Lakish. Otherwise, you can't even start speaking about bittul. Because the chaticha has chashivas, as davish b'minit. Apparently, it became liquefied. We have a reisha where it's batal, because over there we're being mevatel a tumah d'Rabbanan, that's okay. Whereas in the Sefer, Issa Deraisa won't be batal because it's min b'minit. Rabba Amar, I'll give you another pshat. The difference between the reisha and the Sefer is as follows. Reisha Isra Lav. Again, we're speaking, it's nimaycha. All the meat has become ground up and liquefied. Why is it batal in the reisha? Reisha Isra Lav. Because in the reisha we're speaking that the chaticha of chatas is tameh, so dealing with it, eating it would entail Isra Lav. So that allows for bittul easier than the Sefer, which is Isra Karas. Look, the Sefer, we're allowing the mixture, we want to allow it to a non-kohen. Perhaps, he'll deal with it like as though it's not kachim, right? He can deal with it like chulin. Why? We allow the chatas to become batal in the chulin. He'll treat it as chulin, and perhaps he'll eat it when he is tamei. Now, eating kachim when I am tamei, it's kares. So over there, since the consequences are so severe, the Rabbanan don't want to allow such a bittul. They don't want to bring about a negation, a feeling of laxity in the chumrah of kachim, whatever the svara is. When something entails being mevatel issa kares, they don't want to allow the bittul in this case. Asks the Gemara, how can you differentiate between in issa deraisa? You're going to make a chiluk between lav and kares, different levels of severity. Here the chacham are concerned, here they're not concerned. Rabbi himself tells us there's no difference. Kol b'deraisa, whenever the chacham are concerned about Deraisa Yisurim, it doesn't make a difference. Loishna Yisur Lav, doesn't matter whether it's only a Lav, Loishna Yisur Karas, or it's a Karas. Why would they draw that line between Karas and Lav in this case of Bittul? Kasha, indeed, we leave it as a Kasha. Rav Ashi Omar, I'll give you the answer to your question. You know why? In the Eresha, where you're being Mavatal Chatos Tummy, it works. In the Seifa, where you're trying to Mavatal Chatos Tar into Chulin, it doesn't work. Seifa Mishum Davei Davar Sheyesh Matirin. In the Seifa, you have an easy way out. You see, when it's Tummy, nobody can eat it. Of course, you need to come to Bittul. And we allow the Bittul to happen. But in the Seifa, it's Chatos Tar. Give it to the Kohen. It's a Davar Sheyesh Matirin. It's something which can become mutter, something which is accessible to somebody. And something which has that allowance, something which theoretically can be fed to somebody, even mixed in with 1,000, doesn't help. Rashi and Beitza says, look, why do you have to do bittul? This is a concept midrabanan. Don't be mavatl. Just wait till it's mutter. Feed it to the person who can eat it. So that's the difference between Reisha and Sefer. Responds the Gemara. V'hoder Rav Ashi. Bedusi. Rav Ashi's answer is unacceptable. Why? Leman. Who's trying to access this basar? Right? The chaticha of chatas, tahira, was nisarev with 100 chatichas, chulin tahiras. Who wants to have it? Ila kohen. Is it the kohen who's trying to eat it? Well, he has no issues. Mishra shari, you can eat it even now before the bittul. Ili Yisrael. If it's the Yisrael who wants to eat it, well, guess what? Lo ilah masr can never have it. It's kachim. He needs bittul. You see, the concept of Zova Sheish Lamatirin, when it's classically used, like in the beginning of Mesechus Beitza, we're speaking about something which eventually would be mutter, like a muktzah, which is asur today, we mutter tomorrow, don't allow bittul. Wait! Have some patience. So something which is actually asur to you now, that item will turn around and become mutter. That's called Davar Sheish Lamatirin. It's going to have a heter later. So bittul cannot be applied. But over here, how do you apply that concept in the case of a chatichas chatos? Why? Because a kohen can eat it. Sure, a kohen can have it now. A Yisrael can never have it. So it's unlike the classic case of davar sheish l'matir, meaning the Yisrael who wants to have it and can't have it now will never have it. So why can't you allow bittul to give him access to this piece of meat? Why isn't bittul a fair approach? Ella the Rav Ashi b'dusi. Rav Ashi's answer is unacceptable. It's not something which we're going to work with. Okay, so let's just recap this little piece of Gemara before we continue. We had a brisa which has a reisha and a seifa, speaking about very similar cases, but with minor differences. In the reisha, we have a chatichas chatas, shenis arva, right? It was tami b'tahiris. So that piece was tami. The other ones were chatas, which are tar. We say bittul works. In the seifa, we have a chatichas chatas, which is tar, got mixed into other tahiras that happen to be chulin. We want to be mavatal the kachim, the chatas concept, and make it roi for a 9 kohen. We don't allow bittul. Why not? So perhaps let's first pick at go Rabbi Yehuda. Straightforward approach. We're speaking about chatichas, actual pieces of meat, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, even though pieces are sometimes sold by count, it doesn't disallow bittul. So bittul can work even in chaticha, and that's the case in the brisa. So what's the difference between reisha and seifa? Reisha is, well, you're going to incur a great loss, because when that chatichas chatas tmeya mixes with the 100, everything becomes asur to anybody. Nobody can have a kachim tmein, so it's batal. Whereas in the seifa, where it's just a matter of hefsed muat, because it's a chatichas chatas tahira with other pieces of chulin that are tar. At the worst case, you'll sell it to the kohen for a discount. It's only hefsed muat, and as we explained, it's a seder, and it also has chashivas. No bittul will be allowed in that case midrabanan. The question was according to Rish Lakish, who holds that a chaticha can never be batal. Apparently, the brisa, at least in the reisha, allows bittul, speaking in the mayach. It got liquefied. It's no longer intact. So what's the difference between reisha and the seif? The Gemara had 3 tirutzim. Number 1, reisha is tumah midrabanan. it's not a severe tumah min Torah, and therefore we allow bittul, as in the Sefer, trying to be mevatel the kachim with the chulin, that's issa deraisa, and since it's min b'mina, we don't allow it. Second shot, the Reisha was dealing with carbon, which is tamei, where at most it's just a lav for eating it, whereas in the Sefer, we're dealing with being mevatel the kachim, which can get involved in karis. We don't allow the bittul. Rav Ashi says, well, in the Reisha, there's no way out, it's tamei, ein le matir, so it's batal, whereas in the Reisha, just give it to the kohen. It's davar sheyesh lo matir, and therefore with the Rabbanan we don't allow it. Okay, let's go back to the beginning of the sugya. We had a Mishnah, a fellow who was an androgynous, this joint creature, male-female situation, and the Mishnah says, if he marries, this androgynous kohen can feed his wife. He can feed her things which a kohen feeds his wife, truma, etc. What type of truma? Says Rish Lakish, androgynous is really a suffix. We're not sure if he's really a male. So at most, he can feed her truma. Bizman hazeh, nowadays it's only the Rabbanan that he can feed her. But otherwise, something which is minat Torah, he can't feed her. So when the Mishnah says he can feed her, it means truma. It means truma bizman hazeh, which is the Rabbanan. So Rish Lakish held that according to that Rabbi Yossi, right, who says that he can feed her truma, Rabbi Yossi holds truma b'zman hazeh is Rabbanan, because not all of Yisrael live in Eretz Yisrael, etc. It's only with the Rabbanan. Rabbi Yechon says no such a thing. Rabbi Yossi holds truma even nowadays is deraisa, and therefore apparently Rabbi Yossi, when he allows her to eat his truma, was speaking about regular truma minat Torah, even chazav v'shoy, karbanos, whatever. So bottom line is, we have a shaila regarding truma b'zman hazeh. Rish Lakish says it's midrabanan. Rabbi Yechon says it's midaraisa. Of course, they're focusing on shitas Rabbi Yossi. What does Rabbi Yossi hold? Daraisa derabban. V'savar Rabbi Yechon. Is it so that Rabbi Yechon holds that according to Rabbi Yossi, truma b'zman hazeh is really daraisa? But Tani, listen to this brayse. Shtei kupos. We have two containers. Achas shel chulin. One contains chulin material. V'achas shel truma. The other one contains truma. V'lifneim. And before them, we have two boxes, two baskets, two containers, large containers. Two size containers. Achas shel chulin, one containing chulin material, v'achas shel truma, the other one truma. V'naflu elu b'seich elu, and the kupos containing the truma, one the chulin, got tipped into the large containers. You don't know which one went into what. Did the chulin go into the chulin, and the kachim and the truma to the truma, in which case you're lucky, or perhaps vice versa? Hareil mutar, everything's okay. Why? We hope for the best. Shani Omer, I can speculate. I can say truma l'soich truma naflu, truma material tipped into the truma. V'chulin b'soich chulin naflu, and the chulin fell into the chulin. Everything's safe and sound. So that's the price. V'amar Rish Lakish, and Rish Lakish added, one more condition must be met. You need bittul b'roiv. V'hu. This only works sherabu chulin ala truma. Let's say the container containing truma was 1 pound, and the container on the floor, which had the chulin, was a bit more than 1 pound, and they tipped. It's okay, because even if the truma fell into the chulin, there is more chulin material than truma. Now, typically you need more than just a little bit more. Typically you need 100 against 1, all that. But that's midrabban. Minat Torah, we know that achri rabim lahatos, you follow the majority. As the Gemara says, chad b'trei batel, even 1 falls into 2, it's batel. So in this case, since you have the svara of shani omer, like the Bryce says, shani omer, I can just speculate, I can assume. Why should I suspect that the worst happened? Why can't I just say it probably worked out? In fact, there's a chazaka to support you. You know, this thing was fine. This chulin here was fine. Something fell into it. Who's to say what fell into it? Let's hope everything's good. And has a chazaka that it's kosher. Has a chazaka that it's mutter. Still, says Rish Lakish, we're not that liberal. You have to have at least bittul b'roiv. That's Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yechon Amar, afa b'shaloi rabu chulin ala truma. No, you don't need roiv. You don't need it. Rashi says, this Samchinon Asha Ani Omer. This svara of Shani Omer. Let's assume that it fell into its matching material. That svara of Shani Omer is sufficient to allow it. You don't need Bittul B'Reiv. So it's interesting. It's almost like they cross Shittas. Rish Lakish, who says Truma nowadays is Drabanan, he requires more than Rabbi Yehuda. He says Shani Omer is not enough. You need a Reiv as well. And Rabbi Yehuda is the one who says that Truma nowadays is Minat Torah. He says no, you don't even need a Reiv. You need less. Shani Omer is enough. It's almost paradoxical. Bishleim Rish Lakish. I understand Rish Lakish's shita. He holds Kasava, but the Rabbanan Nami. Even if it's only Truma the Rabbanan, Rabbi Yehuda Ba'ina, we need the element of Reiv. We don't want to just be mattered straight out, which might allow someone to take things lightly. You want to have some sort of bittul b'reiv. So when both conditions are met, the shani omer, on top of which you have the reiv, it's okay. Ela Rabbi Yehuda kasha, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, shani omer, it's a suffix. You don't know what happened. It's a rice. It's a possible the rice. How can you just go l'kula? And apparently, it's not really a bona fide chazaka because the fact that you see things falling in, whatever the svara is. Rashi says it's a deraisa. How could you just go l'kula? Says the Gemara. 1 second. True. Rabbi Yehuda, when he says Truma nowadays is deraisa, that was all in reference to Shitas Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi was the one who spoke about the androgynous and you can feed a Truma and he holds Truma nowadays is deraisa. But this brisa that we just mentioned. Hamani Rabbanon, this is Shitas Chachamim. They hold, of course, they hold that Truma Bizman is the Rabbanon. And as such, there's room to be lenient. And as such, Shani Omer is sufficient to be matter. Rish Lakish disagrees. He says, you need Reiv on top of that, but we can at least try to understand it. We can try to understand Rabbi Yehuda's Shita. It's only Truma the Rabbanon, therefore, when there's a suffix, we say, let's hope for the best. When I spoke about Truma nowadays being the rice, that was Shitas Rabbi Yosi, the Sanya, B'Seder Olam, as we find the Bryce and the Seder Olam, which reads as follows. Pasuk says, Asher Yor Shal V'Yisecha V'Yirishta. Hashem will bring you into Eretz Yisrael. The Eretz Asher Yorshu Avisecha V'Yirishta. Your parents inherited it, and you inherited it. What's the point of this redundancy? Once inheriting, again inheriting? Pasuk is teaching us something. But it's teaching us that you have to sort of recapture, you have to re-sanctify Eretz Yisrael. Yerusha Rishayna. Ushniel Yeshlein. Eretz Yisrael has to be taken in once and again. In the time of Yeshua, and once again when they left, after the Churban, time of Ezra, they came back, have to again be Mekadosh Eretz Yisrael. Because the Kedusha had expired in between. But Ushlishis Einland. There's no need for a third Kedusha, meaning after the Churban by his Sheni, Rashi calls it Golos Titus. The Aretz remain Kaddish forever. That's Rabbi Yosef's Shita. And therefore nowadays, Truma is still applicable Minat Torah. Rabbi Yechanan, Man Tana Seder Olam. Who's the author of the Bryce of Seder Olam? Rabbi Yosi. Here he goes. Rabbi Yosi holds Truma nowadays is Minat Torah. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says, that Rabbi Yosi, when he allows the androgynous to feed his wife Truma, he's speaking Bizman Hazeh, apparently he's allowing her to do it with Truma the Oraisa as well. Now, Tosis points out that apparently Rish Lakish held differently. He says that the Bryce and Seder Olam, although it is being spoken by Rabbi Yosi, perhaps Rabbi Yosi himself doesn't necessarily subscribe to that shita, he's just relating somebody else's shita. So that's the machlekes here. Within Rabbi Yosi, what is the status of Truma Bizman Hazeh? Okay, so in summation, what about Truma Bizman Hazeh? So one thing's for sure. Shitas Chachamim, not Rabbi Yosi, Shitas Chachamim, is that it's Midrabanan. Within Shitas Rabbi Yosi, you have a machlekes. Rish Lakish says that it's Midrabanan, whereas Rabbi Yehuda holds that Rabbi Yosi himself holds that it's Minat Torah. Let's move on to the next topic, which was alluded to in this brisa that we brought. How are you allowing a suffix in the Rabbanan? Do we need bittul or not? Says the Gemara, "V'sav Rabbi Yechanan, b'derabbanan loy ba'i ribuya." Is that so? that according to Rabbi Yehuda, something which has a potential Issa D'Rabbanan, you don't need Roiv against it to be Mavatal it, even if it's 50-50, which means basically is an equal chance of encountering the Isser as there is encountering their head. That's okay. It's like Saved D'Rabbanan L'Kul. You don't need any Roiv Heter to be Mavatal D'Rabbanan, as we see from Rabbi Yehuda and the Bryce that we just mentioned. Right? The two things tipped into the baskets. Shani Yomer. I hope for the best. You don't need that the recipient, the Chulin, should have more material than the potential Truma that perhaps fell into it. Even if it's 50-50, it's okay. Really? Is that so? V'atanan. Mikvah sheyesh ba'arbaim sa. Milchovanis. Mishnah speaks about a mikvah that was fully filled. It was topped up 40 sa'ah, exactly 40 sa'ah of rainwater. Nosan sa'ah, this fellow took a container of juice, a fruit juice, Rashi says, which is not really suitable for mikvah. He poured it into the mikvah. Right now it's batal. It's fine. It gets incorporated into the mikvah. And then he took out a container of fresh water, a fresh rainwater of that mikvah. It's still fine. It's still kosher. You have enough rainwater in there to go around. Until what point? This is Rabbi Yechanan speaking. Ad rubai. Only until Roiv, which basically means, my love, should we not understand, should we not assume he means the Nishtay rubai, that you need most rainwater left behind in the mikvah for it to be kosher. So you can do this once and again till 19 times. This will ensure that you have 21 portions of rainwater versus the 19 grape juice. So what do we see from here? Even though we're dealing with merely an Issa D'Rabbanan, a Psul D'Rabbanan, Rashi says, Mayim She'uven, water which is drawn in a kli, it's only Paisel D'Rabbanan. Still, you need mostly kosher. You can't say, well, 50-50 is enough. And Taisus actually asks on Rashi, he says, sure, Mayim She'uven is D'Rabbanan, but here we're dealing with fruit juice. Fruit juice is certainly not suitable for the mikvah. So it's not just Midrabbanan, it's D'Oraisa. Taisus has three other pshatim. He says, we're speaking about using this mikveh even for just small, like needles and small utensils, which typically don't need a large size mikveh. Minatori can take those utensils and be tevel even just in a revius, as the Gemara speaks in Psachim. So here, why don't we allow this fellow to take his needle and use this mikveh even with a small portion of rainwater? Why do you have to have most rainwater? That's Midrabbanan. So the issue here is only with the Rabbanan. Right? Because again, machtin, these needles can be toivled even a small amount. The fact that you need a large size mikveh, that's only with the Rabbanan. And the Gemara speaks about not using the mikveh at all unless it has this required amount of water, mostly rainwater, even for these small utensils. We're being toivled in this type of mikveh is only the Rabbanan. So bottom line is, it's a rabbinic concern, it's a Rabbanan issue, and still, we need Roiv, kosher. Number two, he says, Minat Torah, every bucket of grape juice that you throw into the mikveh is really batal. So you throw one in, it's batal. That's it. It's part of the mikveh. You don't have to reckon with it. It doesn't exist. Throw the next one in, it's batal again. Minat Torah, kama batal. As you go in, one after the other, it's batal. You don't have to keep track of how much grape juice, how much rainwater is in there. So this whole idea that you have to be careful and make sure you don't go over the limit, that's only with the Rabbanan. No, and you see by the Rabbanan, you still need Roiv. He says another pshat that the halacha is referring specifically to temed. Well, they took the grain skin material and poured water over it. That's he says Minatur has water in there. So the fact that we sort of ignore that aspect, we just consider it like fruit juice, it's only with the Rabbanan, and still we see that you need Roiv bekashrus. That's the Gemara's kasha on Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda here by the mikveh tells us, even when it's only psul d'Rabbanan, you need Roiv to be kosher. You can't just suffice with 50-50. Whereas earlier we learned that you don't need a Roiv pertaining to Issa d'Rabbanan. It says, well, lie, that's incorrect. When it said that he can do it ad rubai, he didn't mean make sure to leave behind, leave rainwater in there. Don't take the majority. Don't go over 20. You're going to go 20, 21. You leave less than 50% of rainwater, and that's going to be bottled to your grape juice. That's certainly a problem. So at this point, the Gemara holds that when it comes to Psuli the Rabbanon, even 50-50 is okay. The Bayisem, another pshat is, 1 second, even by the Rabbanon, you need bittul beroiv. You can't use a mikveh which is 50% grape juice, because the grape juice is not bottled in the rainwater. So why by the truma with the chulin does he allow bittul even if it's 50-50? Big difference. Shani yoch, it's very different. Shani oimer. Let's remember there's a shani oimer factor. Perhaps he was lucky. The materials matched. The truma fell into the truma and the chulin to the chulin. So in that case, we make it tliyah. We assume, we hope that things worked out. Perhaps it's based on the chazaka concept. Chulin was fine up until now. Let's hope it stayed that way. So according to this text in the Gemara, even by psulim d'Rabbanan, you can't just go 50-50. 50-50 means it's still here, it's still intact. It has to be less than 50%, in which case you can ignore it. Unless you have the sha'ani omer factor, which compensates for that. Okay, let's just summarize again. So here we have a question of a taroivis, when you have a mixture pertaining to Issa d'Rabbanan or Psul d'Rabbanan, whether it's Truma b'zman hazeh, whether it's Ma'im she'uvin, etc. What happens? So let's just take it apart. There's Truma and then there's Ma'im she'uvin, because really they're two separate halachas. When it comes to Ma'im she'uvin, or as the Mei Peres, Rashi says, so then, according to one pshat in the Gemara, even though it's Issa d'Rabbanan, Psul d'Rabbanan, you need roiv. According to one pshat in the Gemara, no, half and half is okay. Two pshatim in the Gemara. And regarding the basket of Truma that just got his contribution, we're not sure from where. Did the Truma fall in or the Chulin fall in? In that case, Rabbi Yehuda says you don't need roiv Chulin. You don't need roiv Chulin. It could be for one of two reasons. Either because by Psul and Issa d'Rabbanan you never need a roiv. 50-50 is enough. Or, as we explained, because over here you have the Svar of Shani Omer, which adds favor to the equation. Adds favor on the side of the heter. Rish Lakish, however, holds that even by Psul d'Rabbanan, Issa d'Rabbanan, certainly, we're not going to allow it unless you have a roiv factor in your favor. Okay, let's go to the last piece of the daf, which really pertains back to the beginning of this whole discussion. We sort of went into a tangent with Bittul, with the Rice, the Rabbanah, with Truma. The starting point was the Mishnah that spoke about not droigenus. Droigenus is a suffix, right? He's sort of the combined entity, ish v'isha. So the Mishnah says, well, he feeds his wife Truma. And then the Mishnah says, androgenous can marry, but he can't he can't be married. I mean, a man can't marry him. And then Rabbi Lezer says, androgenous chayav olav skila kazachar. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay. Now, what status does he have? This androgenous. Is he considered a zachar with certainty? Vadai zachar? Or is it a suffix? 50-50? Well, that was actually a machlekes, Rabbi Yehuda and Rish Lakish. Believe it or not, this is the third machlekes. Rabbi Yehuda says, he's a vadai zachar. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda maintained that he can actually feed his wife Truma Minat Torah. Whereas Rish Lakish says, no. Androgenous says suffix. He has both elements with him, both components. The zachar and the keva. He's neither here nor there. And therefore, he's a suffix. He can only feed his wife Truma D'Rabbanan. We don't know if he can marry. You don't know what he is. He's a suffix. Let's try to bring a raya from the wording in the Mishnah. We're going to start with a raya to Rabbi Yehuda. Tanan, the Mishnah says, androgenous noise, he can marry, which sounds like he can go ahead and get married. He's a zachar. It's right to Rabbi Yehuda. That is a vadei zachar. Tani, let's interpret the Mishnah as follows: not that he can go marry. Im nasa. Well, if he married, it takes hold. We consider it as a valid marriage, pertaining to halachas, pertaining to get, etc. It's not to say that he's a vadai zachar. What do you mean? V'hanoisei ktani. Mishnah says noisei, go marry. Which sounds like it's l'chatchila. He's a zachar. V'tamech, according to you, my avaloi nisa. Why does the Mishnah continue with avaloi nisa? If noisa means go ahead and be my guest, go marry. You're a zachar. But you should know, don't have somebody marry you l'chatchila. Isn't that obvious? If you're considering him a zachar pertaining to him going and marrying somebody else l'chatchila, it's pretty obvious that one should not approach him and marry him. Ella my nisa b'di'evet. Oh, so when it says, well, he's loy nisa, it means that even b'di'evet, if somebody marries him, it doesn't work. So you see that the Mishnah is speaking about di'evets, after the fact. Well, noisa nami di'evet, perhaps when the Mishnah says he can go marry, it also means b'di'evet. If he married, it has validity. It doesn't mean to say that l'chatchila he should go marry. He's certainly a zachar with all the halachas of a man. Says more Amri, no, you can't. No. You can't bring a ride from here to Rish Lakish. That it's all b'di'evet, which means to say that he's not really, he's not really identified. He's not really labeled one way or the other. That's a right to Rish Lakish. No, Amri, no. We can say like this. Loi, noise l'chatchila mashma. We'll sort of separate the two terms that the Mishnah refers to. When it says noise l'chatchila mashma, initially, go ahead and marry. You're a zachar, like Rabbi Yehuda. And then when it says avaloi nisa, but one cannot marry him, it means b'di'evet nami loy. It means to say that even b'di'evet, if one marries him, it has no validity. Which means that they can't feed him truma. Some say it means you don't even have a get. Different ways to learn the Gemara. But bottom line is, we have no right to Rish Lakish. Perhaps the wording of the Mishnah can be interpreted differently. There's one part of the Mishnah, noisei, which means l'chatchila, he's a zach, go marry. And go feed your wife anything. Even truma d'oraisa, like Rabbi Yehuda. Why does the Mishnah have to come back and say, avaloi nisa? It doesn't mean don't l'chatchila get married to a zachar. That's obvious from the first part. If he's a zachar, he shouldn't be treated like an akeva. It just means even b'di'evet. That's a chiddush. Even b'di'evet, we ignore the nikeva aspect, and it's not considered a valid marriage. Says the Gemara. Really, V'Muktani Seifa. The Seifa says, Reb Lezer, right? Androgynos chayav of skila k'zachar. Right? If one interacts with him as married, this physical involvement results in a skila consequence because we treat him like a zachar. That's Reb Lezer. Michlal, apparently, that the shita that preceded Reb Lezer, Tanakama, Svuki Mesapkali, was uncertain as to his identity. Otherwise, what's the machlekes? So this would seem to support Reish Lakish. That the earlier shita, i.e. Rabbi Yossi, holds that a dragoness is a suffix. As the Gemara, no. This is sort of Rabbi Yechon responding. Bein lamar, whether this shita or that shita, shita, everybody considers him to be 100% zachar. So what's the machlekes between Reb Lezer and Tanakama? Iki b'nai, difference is a slight difference, just a nuance regarding the issue of skila for interacting with him as married. Skila b'mishnei mekaymes. You see, the androgynous has the Eivar Zachar, he has the nikvus of a nekeva, right? So if one interacts with this androgynous, mishnei mekaymes, by way of either one of these two mekaymes, the nikvus of the nekeva, or in the back, like by Zachar, right, the mishkav Zachar, that will be the shaila. What happens then? The Mar Savar Chayav al Vaskil Mishnei Mekaymes. Tanakama says that any type of interaction with this androgynous, whether mishkav zachar on the back or in his nikvusai, like a nekeva, either way there's skila. Rashi says the wait for the Gemara later brings psukim to support this. That's a shita Tanakama. Umar Savar Kazachar. And Reb Lezer says, no, only in the Mokim Zachrus, Mishkav Zachar, in the back, but not in the Mokim Nakfus. Why? It seems like Reb Lezer sort of ignores the Nikfus. It has no significance. He's a real Zachar. That's just a supplemental feature. It's not, it doesn't define him. And therefore, interacting with that Mokim is not considered a true interaction with the Zachar, and there's no skila. So bottom line is, according to Rabbi Yehuda, everybody holds that a androgynous is treated as a zachar vade, which is a side point regarding issa skila. So in conclusion, what is the gather of the androgynous? So Tanna Kama, and Rabbi Lezer. Rish Lakish says, well, that's exactly the machlekes. Tanna Kama says it's a suffix zachar. Rabbi Lezer says it's a vade zachar. Because Rabbi Yehuda both hold vade zachar. Question is, Tanna Kama says mishnei mekaymes, and Rabbi Lezer says only b'makayim zachars. Let's do a quick chazar of today's daf. We actually had 3 machlekes, Rabbi Yehuda and Rish Lakish, which sort of, one led to the next. We had a Mishnah about an androgynous who features both the elements of an ish and the elements of an isha. Rabbi Yossi says he can feed his wife truma if he's a kohen. Now, Rabbi Yehuda says androgynous is a vadei zocher. Therefore, he can feed him vadei truma. In fact, truma b'zman hazeh, according to Rabbi Yossi, is their rice, and that's what he's feeding him. Apparently, androgynous is a vadei zocher. Now, although we do find that truma can be bottle, right? We find that the ring of figs are bottle. Well, that's because even if the rice can be bottle, that's because there's nothing holding it back bittul unless it's something so prominent, which is always sold by count. But something which is occasionally sold by count can have bittul. That's Rabbi Yehuda's approach to the sugi. Rish Lakish says no. Rabbi Yossi, who allows the androgynous to feed his wife truma, was speaking about truma b'zman hazeh, which is the rabbanon, and that he can feed him. He can feed her because an androgynous is really only a suffix ish, suffix isha. And I'll even prove it to you, says Rish Lakish. Otherwise, how can we allow bittul by this ring of figs that we discussed yesterday? A ring of figs, that's chashav, that's prominent. It has individuality. It's davar shebemin. At least occasionally it's sold by count. It can't be bottle. If it's the rice, apparently truma b'zman hazeh d'rabbanan. Oh, that's what we allow bittul in that case. Then we had another brisa which discussed the chatas meat being bottle. We had a reisha where it was bottle, dealing with chatas tamei becoming bottle and chatas tar bottle. In the sefer we had chatas tar being bottle on 100 pieces of chulin. You don't allow the bittul. So go to Rabbi Yehuda. Well, chaticha of chatas, even though it's something which is chashav, something at times sold by count, it can be bottle. But in the sefer where it's tar and tar, just give it to the kohen. We don't allow bittul in that case. Question was according to Rish Lakish. Chatichas chatas, that's significance. At times, occasionally it's sold by count. How could it be bottle? Oh, Midi Maicha was speaking. It's no longer a piece. It's no longer intact. It's blended. It's ground up. It's liquefied. If that's the case, then why in the Reish is a bottle and the Sefer it's not bottle? The Gemara gave us 3 terutzim how to explain the brisa. All the best to you and much hatzlacha.